Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 1673A, and today's date is September 25th, 2018, and the title of the episode is Confirmed Globalist Plans Rejected. Next, reject the central bank system. Now, before I get started, I wanted to talk about debt and how it affects each and every one of us. And yes, we hear the word debt, but what happens if I told you that you owed $65,318 to the government? Your wife or husband also owed $65,318, and your children, regardless of their age, owed $65,318 too. I can just imagine what your reaction would be. Most likely very angry and say, I'm not going to pay that, no way. But again, you do owe it. Why? Because the reality is the United States is $21.5 trillion in debt. Actually, that is what they're telling us. Most likely, it's a lot more. And we know the U.S. government is continually borrowing. They still haven't paid off the Second World War. Why does this all matter? With the stock market at all-time high and a crash ever more likely, together with increasing inflation, this matters a lot. And it matters because Medicare, Social Security, and all the other props you have been relying on to support you in your senior years just aren't going to be there. America can't afford you anymore. So what can you do? Luckily, there's one alternative which can keep a roof over your head and your health bills and pension paid. There's never been a better time to invest in precious metals so you can be on the safe side and take no chances. Gold is climbing from recent lows, and Noble Gold are ready to talk to you about what you can do to sort out a safety net for you and your family going forward. So check out the link below, because the only person that will protect your wealth is you. Let's get into the economic collapse financial news. Now, we've talked about the plan to sidestep globalism, where globalism is being dismantled right in front of our eyes. Soon, the central banks, that will be the next target. And Trump has already confirmed this at the UN, which we'll get to in just a minute. But first, I wanted to talk about the BREXIT. And we know the negotiations have been going on for quite a while. And Theresa May, it looks like she's actually putting on a show. And it looks like that these Brexit negotiations, they're going nowhere. Now, she has no intention of staying strong on the Brexit negotiations. Remember, the people in power, the central bankers, they have a completely different agenda than the people. I mean, we saw it happen in Greece. The people in Greece voted for Tsipras. They thought he was going to go up against the central banking system, and he folded. Same thing's happening out in the UK. The people wanted to exit the EU. They voted on it. And, of course, the leaders are saying, yes, we're with you, but nothing was done. Now, her job was always to deliver a Brexit deal that was, in effect, no deal. She was to thread the needle that kept the UK and the European Union for everything that matters, the customs and trade unions, while selling the illusion of an independent Britain that has no voting rights on the floor of the EU Parliament. And she is rapidly coming to the end of her rope, because let's seriously step back for a moment and look at the complete irrelevancy of the Northern Ireland border, which is the issue of the day holding up the entire deal. And it's complete nonsense. It's a stall tactic. And you can see that the leaders, they're in line with the central banking establishment. And to me, this whole Brexit deal is starting to look like a gigantic show. And it looks like it's going to go absolutely nowhere. But we will see as time goes on. We see down in Mexico that the new Mexican president, he came out and he's going up against the central bank. Around 200 central bank employees, including 20 senior executives, have left their posts at the Bank of Mexico since presidential elections on July 1st. Now, this is very interesting. The new president, they call him AMLO, he's out there and he is slashing salaries for senior government officials and bureaucrats as part of a sweeping cost-cutting measures. And he's letting everyone know that Mexico is bankrupt. And he's letting the central bank know if the economy completely implodes, it's not because of him, it's because of the central bank. And if it does implode, he's going to come after the central bank. Because he said in the following statement, the country is going through a very tough economic situation, a situation of bankruptcy. We may not be able to fulfill all the demands being made of us, but rest assured, we will fulfill all we promised in the campaign. And he went on to say, if the economic conditions deteriorate, it will not be the president of the republic's fault, but rather due to external circumstances or the Bank of Mexico's poor handling of financial policy. So right there, he's calling out the central bank, criticizing the central bank in Mexico. The same thing that Trump did here in the United States. And this is how it begins. They start calling out the central bank. And we can see that there are many countries around the world that are calling out the central bank. Italy has been doing this for a while, saying that they're going to leave the EU. And again, we go back to Russia where they said, listen, everyone needs to start using their national currency instead of a centralized currency. And eventually what they're going to say is while you're using your national currency, take control over the central bank. This is where this is all headed. Now, the central banks are very worried about any other type of monetary system except theirs. They don't like precious metals. They don't like the cryptocurrency market. And we can see in the cryptocurrency market, they're continually manipulating it just like the precious metals market, where they dump cryptocurrencies to bring down the market, to make it look like, yeah, see, this is not a stable market. You really don't want to be in it. It's going nowhere. You should really be in the dollar. And they've done this with gold and silver over a very long time. You know what happens when the central banking system implodes and we come off of the central banking system? All of a sudden, you're going to see precious metals, cryptocurrency shoot up because they don't like anything challenging their system. Now, we see that Shiller has finally admitted, and they're reporting on home prices, that home prices in July, they have risen at the slowest pace since August last year. Now remember, they look at 20 different cities. They look at the property values. And what they're saying is that the property values are declining right now. Actually, if you go back in time and you look at 2012 all the way to 2014, property prices were a lot higher. They've come down quite a bit, and they've been flatlined since around 2014. And now they're dropping, which we've been talking about quite a bit. This was the biggest miss since May of 2016. July marked the fourth consecutive month that annual price gains in the 20-city index decelerated. That's in sync with other reports indicating housing is stalling as buyers shy away from the high prices because the mortgage rates, again, are moving up, kicking them out of the market. And we're starting to see the same exact things that we saw prior to 2008. Sales of existing single homes have dropped each month for the last 6 months and are at the levels of July 2016. The real estate market is completely falling apart. And we know the entire plan is to move away from the globalist system, to move away from the central banking system, to pump the economy up, to make it look like the economy is doing better than ever. And this will take the heat off of Trump while he tries to bring manufacturing back to this country, try to set up the country for this major reset. And we see there are many other countries looking at a payment system outside of the SWIFT system. I mean, China's done it, Russia's done it. Now it looks like the European markets are looking to do this. They're preparing for a reset. This is what they've been preparing for quite a while. Actually, before this, they thought the central bank would move everything to China. They were going to set up a completely different payment system, but now we see this is not in the cards anymore. Things have changed. Now, the tariffs that we're seeing and all these trade wars that the corporate media is out there talking about, they were going to use this to say this is why the economy fell apart. But Trump has been pumping up the economy, so they can't use it. It's very difficult to say the economy's falling apart when the economy, in statistical information, is getting a lot better. So his plan is to force big companies to pull out of China and come back to the United States. Bring back the manufacturing plants, bring back the corporations, and hopefully he's able to do this before 2020, at least bring some of them back. Now, this is not going to make America great again when he brings them back, because the next phase is to get rid of the central banking system. But you need to start bringing these companies back, because if you get rid of the central banking system and we have no manufacturing, the economy's dead. The economy's dead right now. We're living in an illusionary world. That's the problem. And he's been planning this with Xi Jinping. This has been planned since the beginning. They're on board with these tariffs. So tariffs are going to force companies back to the U.S. because remember, for years, the central bank, the globalists, they've been moving manufacturing corporations out of this country because they were preparing for a one world government. And they were trying to bring the United States down to the level of the third world nations. This way, all countries would be equal. That was their plan. Now, tariffs are not going to have the effect that everyone thinks they're going to have. Because China has the Belt and Road, the Silk Road, and has the ability now to find replacements for the U.S. market or their U.S. customers. So it's not going to be so hard for China for a couple of reasons. One is that the Chinese goods are still relatively affordable priced. So developing countries or countries in Europe or Latin America are still able to afford these products. Remember, Trump has been working with the Chinese. All this talk about, oh, Chinese, we're going to get them. No, we're not going to get the Chinese. We're going to get the deep state that has been operating inside of the Chinese government, inside of the Chinese country. The plan to undo everything the globalists have been doing, the plan to get rid of what they were doing, is in process right now. That's what is happening. Let's take, for example, soybean market. Now, China has been importing soybeans. Well, they reduce the amount that they're importing from the U.S., and instead they turn to other countries like Brazil, which also produces a lot of soybeans. So with the Belt and Road, China will have the ability to sell and to export and import their products with really not that much changing in China. The United States will benefit because these tariffs will bring back manufacturing to the United States. This is the plan for the reset. Now remember, the globalists were moving everything off to China, and it took many, many years to do this. How did they do this? With taxes, with regulation. They made it impossible for companies to stay here and to manufacture here. And they said, hey, look at China, look at the emerging markets. It's so much cheaper over there. There's hardly any tax regulations. There's really not much. So let's move the companies out over there. They did this on purpose. I mean, if you look at the number of regulations and the number of taxes, who would want to run a company here in the United States? So what Trump's going to do, he's going to remove a lot of these taxes, remove a lot of these regulations to give these companies incentive to come back, or to maybe to open up a manufacturing plant and have both in both locations and eventually bring the companies fully back to the United States. This is what is in process right now. And Trump was at the UN. He was giving a speech and basically rejected internationalism and embraced the nationalist populism that Trump has championed. Trump blasted the ideology of globalism, multinational organizations like the UN that he said infringe on national sovereignty. Trump urged other nations to look out for themselves and their own interest and allow the U.S. to do the same. He said, I honor every nation to pursue its own customs, beliefs, and traditions. The United States will not tell you how to live or work or worship. We'll only ask that you honor our sovereignty in return. Trump vowed that the U.S. would not be taken advantage of any longer, and slammed both its friends and foes for taking advantage of the U.S.'s defense spending and its trading policies. Now, Trump has accused countries of abusing the U.S. market's openness, charging some nations with relentless product dumping, forced technology transfer, and the theft of intellectual property. In a direct attack on China, Trump pointed to the loss of 3 million U.S. manufacturing jobs to what he referred to as market distortions. Those days are over. We will no longer tolerate such abuse, he said. And he also said the world trade system is in dire need of change. China says the world trade system is in dire need of change. The BRIC nations say the World Trade Organization is in dire need of change. Russia says the World Trade Organization is in dire need of change. He went on to say that the World Trade Organizations, those countries that were admitted to the WTO, violate every single principle on which the organization is based. Of course it does, because their agenda is not to help each country, to help trade. It's to set up a centralized one world government with one currency that the central bankers, these non-elected leaders, will rule over. This is what the TPP was all about. They were going to set a court system above each and every government, and they would have the last word. This was the first phase that they were going to use to try to control the entire world. But of course, that was completely terminated when Trump came into office. If we had another person in office, guess what? We would have that right now. Instead, we're making a decentralized trade deal with every single country, not based on one centralized system. This is what the Belt and Road is all about. And we can see that we're moving in this direction to prepare for this major reset that is coming. And remember, this reset is not just the economy, it's government. It's resetting the central bank and removing it, resetting how we work politically, geopolitically. It's a gigantic reset. And we're going to be going through a transition. And this is why everyone needs to be ready and prepared for this transition, because when we come out of the central bank system, it's going to be a little difficult. Remember, we've been under a system of debt. We're going to move to a system of prosperity. It's a very big difference. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.